I got soaked through the rainiest days, they made me this way. Should've left the street, but it paid me to stay. The path that I walked on was paving my pain, so I strayed and laid bricks for the opposite lanes. If you ain't rich, you don't play about that guap. I view the city like a section of a swamp. A lot of shit grows, but nothing that you want. A lot of shit grows.
Don't mind me just injecting some dank weeds right into my fucking bloodstream, dog. Dude, how high do you even have to be? How high do you even have to be saying these things? Whoa. Digibro's so high. He won't shut up about how high he is all the time. He won't shut up about being high and drunk, and he fucks. You know Digibro has sex now? Did you hear about that one? Apparently he has sex sometimes. That's naughty, dude. That's naughty. That's naughty, dude. That's naughty, dude. Wow! Look at Digibro over here being so high. He probably thought this was funny because he was smoking weed. Never mind that he wasn't high. Wasn't even drunk. I just opened this bottle for the sake of that clip. You know. None of you would be able to tell the difference. No one would be able to tell the difference if I was drunk or high in any video I made. Except maybe the Bathos vlog. You could probably tell I was drunk in that vlog. I mean, the fact of the matter is that I wouldn't make a video I didn't think was interesting. I've recorded stuff while being super high before and thrown it away because it wasn't interesting or funny. I learned that lesson immediately after I started smoking pot. Which, yes, was recently. Yes, I am going through the phase of realizing that watching stuff high is a lot of fun. Because it definitely changes the way you perceive the things you're watching. You notice a lot of details you probably wouldn't notice sober. Which, in my mind, is excellent for analysis. Excellent. If you're someone who spends all your time reading deep into things, having the extra time to process what's going on, it's really fun. Usually I then check the things I said, you know, the things I came up with when I was high. I don't record or write anything high. I can't even fucking speak. I write it down, I scribble it on this paper here. You know, I'll scribble something like, oh, did I write anything on this particular page? You know, I'll write something down like Caraberos name. And then when I'm sober, I look at that and I think about what it was, and I'm like, yeah, that is actually really interesting. A lot of people seem to think that the point of that video is not interesting. I think it's super interesting. It says a lot about the iconic nature of the character. That, you know, to me, it seems obvious that either every character named Caraberos should be called that, or every character named Cerberus should be called Cerberus. The fact that there's only one that's called Caraberos is just because that character is so iconic. That's really interesting to me. That's the kind of shit I live for. That's like my favorite type of analytical point. Ones that are super obscure and weird and like are just interesting in what they say about culture, you know? Because in Japan, that wouldn't be the case. They wouldn't make any distinction between that Caraberos and another Caraberos. It's only in the U.S. because of the impact of Card Captor Sakura. And the fact that Karo-chan is his nickname. I think that's fascinating. Where would I ever fit that into a video? Because it's not like I came up with that idea and then read it sober and went, oh, this is such a high idea. It's the only way I could justify talking about it. I thought, I don't really know how to make this into a video. What if we packaged it in the idea that it's a high idea? You know, like that is the narrative of it, because that's funny. I think it's funny. I think it's funny. I think drugs are funny. I mean, they are, objectively. I've always been a fan of stoner comedies. I didn't even smoke weed, but I've always loved, stoner comedies. I've always looked up to lots of people who do drugs. The creator of gonzo journalism, Hunter S. Thompson, is known for his drug use. That is pretty much what got him famous. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the intense experimentation with psychedelics, and the honest reporting of their effects. That is what has made him a famous man. And I think that's pretty cool, I mean, even if the effects of weed are that they make you think thoughts that aren't interesting that aren't... I made this video on Kiki's delivery service. This was recorded over a month ago, a month before its release, because it was part of the 2 Weeks Review, a podcast series that is released for patrons only. It was one of the first things I watched high and talked about how I was high. So at the time, and I knew this was coming because I scheduled this way long ago, and as soon as I saw the reaction to High-Dia, I went, oh god, when that Kiki's Delivery Service video opens with, so we got high and watched Kiki's Delivery Service, which I thought was the funniest place to open the video, because I say it in a really funny way. As soon as I realized that, I was like, oh no, I fucked up. Everyone's gonna complain about this, and that's exactly what happened. But the reading of the movie is interesting, in my opinion. I think it's a good way to read the film, It's not like a weird, twisted, warped viewing of the film like people seem to be implying that it is. It actually makes perfect sense. I've seen the film multiple times. I know everything that happens in it pretty well. I may have come to the conclusions I did while I was stoned, but I thought about them while I wasn't. I recorded the 2 Weeks Review days later after having seen the movie. And, having continued to think about those thoughts. So, to me, it's a really interesting reading. And me and my girlfriend had been discussing that reading, and we both kind of agreed on it. We both saw it that way. She had connected with that message more strongly than I had. And even if it wasn't like what they were going for, or what is the more common reading of the film, that is an even more interesting reason to see it that way. Like, if anything fascinates me, it's when people get something really unique out of something they're watching. I would think that's a big part of why people follow me. Like, I don't think people come to me looking for the objectively true message behind a show. Like, my Psychopaths video, do you think that is, like, exactly what they were going for? Like, I think they were going for a lot of different things, and maybe not necessarily, like, what I'm saying. I don't think I'm pointing out, like, just what is present in the text in that video. I'm reading a lot into it, It's kind of what I do. Big part of my job. I analyzed My Little Pony for years. There certainly was a lot of stuff I read into that show that was not intentional. But as soon as weed got in the mix, as soon as it wasn't just, oh, I'm reading the movie differently, as soon as it was, oh, I'm reading it differently because I'm high, suddenly it's, like, retarded. Like, everyone's like, oh, this is the stupidest opinion you've ever had. You need to stop doing drugs. Even though I just think it's funny to mention the fact that you're high, because why not? I didn't realize the disconnect between how I view drugs, which is that they are great and a good idea, and the way other people do. Because I was raised very differently. I was raised in a drug, sex, and rock and roll kind of household. And I've always looked up to drug, sex, and rock and roll kind of people. And always wanted to be a drug, sex, and rock and roll kind of people. And I've always been very rock and roll, but I didn't have much access to the drugs or sex. I mean, I've been drinking alcohol pretty consistently since I was 19, and everybody knows that. And it's definitely a hell of a lot more dangerous than weed, especially for your body. And it warps your perception of the things you watch, to the extent that you don't remember them. Like, how I barely remember BoJack Horseman Season 1 because I drank a whole bottle of wine while I was watching it. isn't that the more interesting and fun way to consume media? Like, do you want to be a guy who, like, watches everything in a business suit? You know? Do you want to sit down and, like, try to interpret everything as perfectly as, like, the author intended it, and then just regurgitate the exact message back to the audience who should have already gotten it from watching the fucking thing? You know? Or do you want to be someone who interprets things in new and interesting ways, finds different, new avenues of appreciation for something, you know? I think part of it is the edge that my video, was not positive. Like, I was reading this into the movie, but that was not making me enjoy it. Whereas I think if I'd came at it like, oh man, I found this really cool thing about Kiki. It's like, it's got a message about depression, and that's really interesting. People would be like, oh yeah, I never saw it that way. But because I'm like, yeah, I don't like it because it's about this, then people are like, oh, but it's not about that, dipshit. But that has nothing to do with the weed. Because I didn't record it high. Blech.
What's he saying when he says it? What's the underlying topic? What's the motive in his message? What's it all mean? What's he saying when he says it? What's the underlying topic? What's the motive in his message? What's it all mean? What's he saying when he says it? What's the underlying topic? What's the motive in his message? What's it all mean? What's he saying when he says it? What's the underlying topic? What's the motive in his message? But what if he was bored and there was no between the lines? It was a way to pass the time. He liked the way it rhymed.
You know, I've always been very selective about who I work with. I've never been somebody who likes just doing collaborations for the sake of it and just putting people in videos to have them there. You know, back in the day, on YouTube and the internet in general, collaborations were like the bread and butter. Everybody wanted to do collabs. And this was all because of that guy with the glasses. Because in that community, everybody would work together closely on lots of projects, especially these big, epic videos they do once a year where all of them met up and had a really stupid fucking adventure plot or whatever the fuck. I haven't seen any of them. I don't want to. But this made it so collabs are very popular. And the whole time I've been on YouTube, I've always been asked for collabs. Asked to collab. Especially back in the My Little Pony days. I did a lot of collabs. Quickly what I found out is that they're largely pointless. Because you have to force the other person into your video. Unless there's something that each of you can uniquely contribute that the other can't. Or if it's about the chemistry between you. Like, for instance, we would do analytical videos. Me and Tommy Oliver. And we'd each write out our part, and then we'd just kind of read them back and forth. And it was like, this could just as easily have been 2 separate videos on each of our channels. There's no reason for this to be a collaborative effort. We quickly realized that and stopped doing it. So I've always been hesitant about collabs unless it's the right context. Podcasts, great for collabs. Vlogs, great for collabs. Because it's easier to bounce off of somebody else. And it gives it a unique flavor that you don't have by yourself, you know? I put out as much solo content as I possibly can. And I do collabs. Sometimes with my friends, sometimes with my offline, you know, cohorts. Lately, a lot with my girlfriend. Sometimes people go, well, they complain about the fact that I'm doing it with my girlfriend, and I'm like, this is not an alternative to anything. In fact, that's the most important thing I want to stress with all of this. None of my content is ever a replacement for my other content. Because that's not the kind of YouTuber I am. There are some people who can't handle running more than one project at the same time. If they launch a new project, it's the death of their old one. This is where you get all those YouTubers who, like, disappear for 2 years because they're making a feature film that sucks. You know. I mean, I love you, AVGN, but that's what happened. That wouldn't be me. I would make the feature film and you'd never notice that I had cut down my upload rate, because I wouldn't have. I'd have scheduled 6 months worth of videos in advance so that the upload rate would never slow down. That would be my method. Remember when I wrote a light novel in like a day? I didn't slow down my channel. My average amount of main channel videos has always been 4 in a month. Sometimes it's only 3. Sometimes it's as low as 2. Sometimes it's up to 5. Sometimes it can even be 7. If I'm really busting ass. Because I really want money. But for the most part, whoa. I'm a guy who does 4 videos a month on the main channel. And for most of my career, that was all the videos I did. 4 a month. And then I would do, a few radio shows or podcasts, like the Pub Crawl, PCP podcast. At some point, I decided to start making vlogs on After Dark about whatever random thoughts came into my head. And a lot of them were things like, look at the janky posters in my room. Whoa! Like, did you know that the character designer of K-On! Is the sister of the character designer of Sword Art Online? And like, just literally that for 4 minutes. And sprinkled in there are these like high concept vlogs. Anime shit now. Objectivity doesn't fucking exist. These are the ones people remember and latched onto. And somehow it became in people's heads that, like, I was cranking out all this, like, insanely high-thought vlogging, like, every day. No. Maybe a couple times a month. Most of it was, like, like, that anime snob's a fucking idiot, or, anime quizzes for an hour and a half. Which are great videos. But, you know, it's not high-end, analytical, intellectual content. So, my main channel is at the same rate it's always been. I would argue the same quality level, at least of writing. The ideas might not be as appealing to you. Maybe there's a certain type of content you like the most from me. If you're super into broad concept stuff, I haven't done as much of that lately. Except for the Evangelion Altered Anime Eternally video. If you're super into, like, long breakdowns, I haven't done too much of that. I've been doing mostly these hyper-focused, short, videos that are, like, really dense and really well written. Spending way more time on my scripts than I ever have before. Trying to make them perfect. And, the After Dark channel, a couple times a month, some deep shit. Maybe we don't need YouTube anymore. Big deal. Whoa, big deal. And then in the meantime, there's, like, finish or fail. It's like, let's watch every anime and, like, react to it in a couple minutes. Because why not? It's fun. People like it. It's a lot of views. Dropped a piece of bacon on the floor. Gonna pick it up. Hey. Stuff like insomnia analysis in the meta hole. For those of you who, like, your world's gotten too fucking weird, that's when I will appear and tell you it's all fucked. Lost my train of thought. Alright. So, right now, in addition to what 1 year ago was 4 videos a month. In fact, 1 year ago today, because it would be October, rather. Fuck me. It was right after Devu had moved in. I know in the month of September we only got 2 videos done. Or maybe that was October. Whatever month had the Haikyuu video and the Mob Psycho video, and those were like the only 2 we did. And then, I was slow for a spell. And, most of the vlogs were like life update vlogs and shit. So compared to that, compared to 4 videos a month, and maybe 4 interesting After Dark videos, and a whole lot of other shit. Now I've got 4 main channel videos a month, 4 After Dark vlogs that are interesting, and a bunch of other shit. But then we've also got the Old Ass Album Cast releasing every single week. We've got the Game Boys podcast releasing every single week. I've been showing up on the Procrastinators podcast again, pretty often. Digi and May's Pokemon Journey, if you happen to want to listen to people talk at length about the Pokemon films. Now I've got 2 bi-weekly podcasts that I do for patrons. 45 minutes a week of podcast content for the patrons. This is all just what's going right now. I had a few other podcasts that were going last month, but they've been replaced, you know? So there's like, and Digi and May do these long Let's Plays. Basically, it's just what Digibros was, you know? All of these things are coming out at once, in addition to exactly the content I had before. So in the midst of all this, in the midst of this storm of content from the human content machine, a little 3-minute video. Idea. Kerberos' name is kinda funny. And suddenly, Digi, smoking weed is really affecting your content. Digibro, you've been smoking too much weed. It's starting to have an effect on your content. This video wasn't that interesting. This video that you deliberately released at 3 in the morning, immediately following 2 other videos you had already put out on the After Dark channel that day. A finish or fail video. You know, the thing that everybody's coming to me for right now on the After Dark channel. The thing that people really want from me. But your videos, you're getting high. It's starting to affect your judgment on your videos, man. This random fucking video that you just threw up because you thought it would be funny is indicative of the decline of your content because you've been smoking weed. You talk so much about getting high now, Digi. All you talk about is getting high and having sex. You know, those things that you pretty much only mention on your podcast you do with your girlfriend, your Let's Play show. The things you really barely mention anywhere else. Like you actually don't really talk about them at all. It's just a meme. It's really a meme. Like, it's totally a meme. It's not even real. It's just something that got said enough times when it was first coming up that it spiraled out of control into a meme. And now it's, oh, Digi talks about sex and weed all the time. No, I don't. That's fucking retarded. Finish or Fail comes out every 3 days. It never mentions weed. It never mentions sex, unless we're talking about a show that involves sex. Digi and May's Pokemon Journey comes out every week. It never talks about weed or sex. Fucking Game Boys comes out every week. Never talks about weed or sex. Fucking, what's the other ones I said? None of my fucking podcasts are about weed or sex. It comes up occasionally. A little joke video. Idea. Woo. Bing. Share this little analytical point. No more or less clever than a video about how the Sword Art Online and K-On! Bloodlines are intermixed. For which I was stone sober at every stage of the video being created. No more or less stupid than talking about how some of my posters have weird janky line art that bothers me. You know? As some people have pointed out, I at one point had a video series that I tried to launch called Blip, where it would be little small ideas that weren't long enough to be a full vlog. And that if this vlog had, if the idea had just been Blip 2, nobody would complain. Which is absolutely true. Nobody would have cared. Because they would have seen it as, the point is, it's a small idea that wasn't worthy of a full video. But because it was a high idea, it's a whole other story. Which is hilarious and insane to me. That people are so easy to fall into that trap. That you couldn't analyze what the content was. Like, look at it and understand that this is a small, silly video made to be kind of funny, but also to possibly have an idea that I think is interesting, that has no effect on any of the other content I make. How is that possible? How is it possible that people who follow a channel dedicated to analysis don't do anything to analyze the channel? Fucking idiots. Let me show you what to me is one of the most beautiful things in the entire world. More beautiful than anything in my collection, anything in my room. It's this. This is my calendar. As you can see, everything on it's crossed off. Back in September, I kept, you can see right here, my calendar for September. I kept a calendar throughout the month of September so that I could work ahead of myself. So, it's not super detailed. It's just a list of everything that had to come out. The main thing on here is the scoring shows video, which I tried to get done as fast as possible and crossed them all off the list. Then towards the midway point of September, I scheduled out all of the rest of the year. All of the content that had to be done for the rest of the year. All the main channel videos that had to be done. All of the podcasts that were going to come out on a weekly basis. And also, like, you know, some ideas for shows that were going to basically last the span of 1 month. So in here we have the Old Ass Album Cast, Rixty Minutes, Manga Mondays, Finish or Fail, 2 Weeks Review, which is one of the patron-exclusive podcasts for those who don't know, and the podcast previews for those, which have been coming out every Tuesday on the same day as the podcasts. But the previews are all for 1-month-old podcasts, usually. Digi and May's Pokemon Journey, Game Boys, content roundups, PCP episodes I decided to be on, some of the gameplay videos that we released. It's all here. All here. Every episode of Digi and May's Pokemon Journey that's come out in October was produced and scheduled in September. All of them. All 4. Maybe 5? All 4. All of the Game Boys podcasts that will come out this month were made and scheduled in September. A lot of the patron podcasts were recorded way ahead of time. A lot of Finish or Fail was recorded ahead of time. The Finish or Fail is the main one that I've had to keep up with over the course of the month. That I've mostly been doing sort of live in the moment. Usually just a few days after after I finish the shows is when the videos go up. So, Old Ass Album Cast. That one's been harder to keep up with as well. But as you can see, it is currently October 24th as of midnight. This calendar is basically done. Finish or Fail up through 9 is complete. I haven't actually crossed off 9 yet because I finished it today. The only things left are Finish or Fail episode 10 and the Old Ass Album Cast that will be released on the 29th. Everything else is completely done for all of October. And then you look at the November calendar. I haven't even really been trying to start November work. But, you know, you look at it, and a lot of the first week is crossed off. Why did I do that? It's because I realized that while I love being the human content machine, and that is perhaps my greatest skill, I also want to do other things. Back early this year, as you may remember,
I was losing my fucking mind. I made a bunch of videos about how I was becoming depressed again, how I wasn't getting out enough, how I was really feeling the weight of being someone who just makes content all the time and doesn't really get out and do things. Because I had nobody to do things with, and I don't really like doing things alone. So, now that I'm living with my girlfriend, and have been for 4 months, at some point I realized that I really value spending time with her. I also wanted to be able to watch things for pleasure and not for work, to be able to just basically have more room to move around. And I also felt, and this has been true for years, that I'm always playing catch up with myself. Because even when I do videos way ahead of time, I'm constantly struggling to think of ideas for the next main channel video. I'm always like in this state of panic over, oh god, I don't have enough ideas for my next video. So if I could schedule everything ahead of time and get as much of it done as possible, that would not only leave me with lots of leisure time, but it would also leave me with time to figure out what's next. To constantly plan new, weird ideas and just experiment constantly. That's been the main theme, experimentation. Try podcasts with different hosts I've never done them with before. Try new series, new weird ideas, new styles of podcasts I've never done before, new types of videos. Something like Hidea comes about because I have this time. I have so much extra time that I can fill in the gaps between, the tiny gaps between all of these crazy releases with even more releases. I can come up with even more ideas, even more things to just throw at the wall and see what sticks, you know? So, you know, you can't say the weed is affecting the content, because the content is already done. All the content was done last month. The content is here. The content was completed long ago, so I would have time to sit around and smoke weed all day, every day, for a week, if I want to. I could do that. I can literally take the next week off. All the work is done. The last main channel video I have to release is already being edited by Devu right now. All the podcasts are done. All that's left is to do one more Finish or Fail, and one more Old Ass Albums cast, which I am going to record immediately after I'm done with this meta hole. I could literally take the next week, sit around smoking weed, and putting out weird fucking videos about whatever the fuck I want. It will not disrupt the content, because the content is already done. And I'm uploading a video that's an 1.5 hour long review of Koe no Katachi because me and May saw it in theaters, and why not do a video about it? Why not just do every video? Why not constantly inundate people with content when they're not even asking for it, just to see what works and what doesn't?
See, I found myself in a bit of a predicament, which is that I have a very fractured audience. I have people who want all kinds of different things from me. And I am happy to do all kinds of different things because the way I see it, stagnation is death. As soon as you start stagnating, that is when you become uninteresting. You might be more successful if you stagnate. If you decide to make one type of content forever, then as long as that type of content is still something people want, you will always have a career. But if you're like me, it is your soul that wilts. Or alternatively, the people who are paying you might be the ones who want you to experiment. In my case, I don't really make money off of ad revenue. At this point, nobody does, apparently. But I make my money from Patreon. And over time, the sentiment had emerged among my Patreonies that that my main channel content was not the most interesting content I do. A lot of them constantly tell me they prefer the After Dark channel. That's where the real bread and butter is for them. So if the people actually lining my pockets want the After Dark content, why make the main channel content, which doesn't really make me any money? The main thing that it can do is to bring in new viewers. New people who didn't know who I was, who become interested. But right now it's not really doing that.
The main channel videos aren't pulling massive amounts of hits. They're not pulling a lot of new viewers. It's basically just my subscribers. Very occasionally do I get somebody new, and when I do, they're usually finding me through the fucking Sword Art Online videos, or the Asterisk War videos, or the Why Terrible Anime in One Episode video. You know? Not a lot of new people finding me through main channel content. Not a lot of people patroning for that. The video I've put out that gained me the most new patrons in the last, 3 months was the YouTube, Why We Don't Need YouTube video. Because I talked a lot about Patreon in that. And a lot of people said it made them realize they should become a patron. That was an unscripted vlog that I came up with the idea for on the spur of the moment. I mainly do the main channel videos still because I still want to have that avenue, because I still do come up with ideas that I would prefer to be fully edited videos on the internet. And in order for me to have an editor, I need to keep Devu employed. So I kind of do a lot of them just for his sake. And to just maintain the idea of me as an anime YouTuber. You know, as a big, popular anime YouTuber. Because that idea has value in itself. Especially to larger groups. That's the career that can help me to help the anime industry. As I continue to work with the Flying Colors Foundation closely. And they have all these ideas about how they are going to, support the industry and help to change its ways. And I'm working pretty closely with them on those things. So it's kind of important that I have a platform that people will pay attention to if I want to make those changes. So at this point, it's a fucking activism channel. Maybe even a charity channel. You know, not to say that people don't still love those. My patrons still love the main channel videos, but, I really do wonder if I stopped making them, how much my Patreon would actually dip. Because to a lot of the people who consume a lot of my content, they are a tiny blip in the ocean of the content, you know? If I put out 10 hours of podcasts in a week, or a day, that happened the other day. There was an episode of Podcast, the show that Joe from Pause and Select does, an episode of the PCP, that was 2 hours long, an episode of the Plebe and the Weeb that was an hour long, and I did a Patreon live stream that night that was 2 hours long, and a Patreon podcast came out at midnight, I think. No, I'm thinking of something else. Something else came out. It was literally 10 hours of content in a day. And meanwhile, a main channel video is 10 minutes long. So to a lot of my patrons, they probably forget that they even watched that video by the time they reach the end of the week. So the problem is that not all the patrons agree on what is the content they want. Some of them think the old-ass album cast are my best videos. Some of them do not listen to music and don't care about the old-ass album cast. Some of them think that Digi and May Do is the most fun that they have with my content. Some of them will not watch it because it's 3 hours long a lot of the time. Some of them think that Game Boys is really entertaining because it's a nostalgia trip through consoles that they grew up with. Some of them think it's totally boring, that me and Hippo's chemistry doesn't really work in the context of those podcasts. And that I am horribly misinformed about video games, which makes it painful to watch. Which are pretty fair criticisms, but it's an experimental podcast. A lot of them are. Some people really love Digi and May's Pokemon journey. Others have astutely pointed out that it's just me summarizing a Pokemon movie for an hour and a half. So who do you listen to? Who are you trying to please? A lot of people say Hydeia is dumb. They don't like, not only do they not like that it's weed themed, but they think the ideas are stupid. Some people think the ideas are really interesting, including myself. I will admit that the witch hunt idea was pretty much covered in a finish or fail video. I had forgotten that until I made the video. Which, by the way, at no stage of it was being high even a part of it. It was just an idea I'd literally just been having lately and put into a video. And it mostly was on my mind because I first talked about it in that Finish or Fail, and then I encountered like 3 other stories that did the same thing. And that's why I felt like I hadn't already talked about it. But the Caro Barrows one I thought was interesting. I've got another one written down. I'll do it right now. Idea. I was watching, I think it was Bang Dream. I think it was that. It was some show I was watching where the characters were wearing brown school uniforms, and the girl was stating that she had specifically gone to the school for the uniforms because she thought the uniforms were cute. And in Hibike Euphonium, the same thing is said about the same type of uniform. What's her name? The main character of Hibike Euphonium says that she picked her high school based on what uniform she wanted to wear, and it's a brown uniform. And in both cases, I found it very strange because they're very plain-looking brown uniforms. Like, they are kind of cute, I guess, but they're fucking brown. Like, who is excited to wear brown? And it got me wondering, like, is brown a color that girls think is cute in Japan? And are there other examples? Because I feel like I might be able to come up with other examples. The only reason I didn't make this idea is that I only had 2 examples. But, it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting little observation. I have a lot of little observations that I'd love to make videos about, and usually I just don't know what context to put them in. But apparently if you put them in the context of that you had the idea while high, nobody can take it seriously. I know I'm harping on this a lot, but, like, I'm really annoyed. Like, I'm really annoyed about the idea thing. And the Kiki's Delivery Service thing in particular, because I think it's a totally valid reading of the film, regardless of the intoxication level that I was at when I watched the film. But yeah, right now, I'm just putting out lots of random ideas to see what works, and if they don't work, give them the axe. But, like, a lot of these are pre-made to be long so that they give me time to come up with the next idea. Like, if I just said, oh, none of these podcasts are good enough, and I canceled them all, then, I'm now at square one again. I'd rather instead have, like, a huge buffer of these podcasts, let them run for a little while, and then figure out which ones worked and which ones didn't, I never really got back to what I was saying about collaborations. I totally lost the plot on that train of thought when I was walking around the room down there. What I was talking about with the collaborations is that, I'm very careful about who I collaborate with, and I want to test the waters, find out what we do well together, Me and Nate did the Eromanga Sensei Every Week show because Nate is somebody who is very punctual. He is the one who usually dragged me into doing the episodes. I know a lot of people who I have great chemistry with, and I could totally watch a show every week and talk about it, but they will never be on time to talk about the show every week. Nate will be on time. That was the incentive. And it came out really well. So we tried watching other shows, and I thought the 60 Minutes and Made in Abyss podcast both sucked. Because we didn't have the same kind of energy towards those shows. They were just good shows that we were kind of stating the obvious reasons they were good, that anybody could have observed, With Eromanga Sensei, it was the element of going against the grain and the severity of our disgust for the show that made it funny. So I realized me and Nate should not have a show where we just review any random thing. It should be specifically stuff that we really hate, because that's what makes it funny. Me and Hippo doing the Game Boys podcast, I've realized that while I do think me and Hippo can work together, and I think the Game Boys podcast is fine, it's pretty fun to do, especially just to reminisce about these consoles, I think the format of it is the biggest problem. I think we'd do better if we had one thing to concentrate on instead of trying to cover such a broad, sweeping topic, because what ends up happening is that there's a lot of stuff that only one of us knows about, and so it's kind of a one-sided conversation a lot of the time. It'll just be one of us going on and on about a game that we played and not the other, and so it feels like a little too much like we're taking turns. That's the problem with that podcast. Digi and May's Pokemon journey is really fun to do. My biggest problem with that one is that we end up sharing the opinions on the films so strongly that I'm the one who does most of the talking, because May doesn't really need to say the things that I've already said because she feels the same way. It's only the small places where we diverge that, or if I, if she tries to take over the sentence, sort of say what I was going to say, that we can bounce off of each other that way. But, it's rare that we have very different interpretations of a show, and that's what has made some of the finish or fails more interesting. Like, sometimes it's just me rattling off all the points because we agree. Sometimes she notices things I don't, or fills in the gaps between what I'm saying, or we have slight differences, and those are the more interesting ones. We just recorded this, what will probably be out by the time I release this video. Digi and May discuss Koei no Katachi, where we had, even though we ultimately felt the same way about the movie, there were certain characters and certain plot elements that we felt very differently about, and that made it an interesting conversation, which is why I wanted to do that video that way, because I already knew that, because we'd already talked about the movie together, outside the theater. So, this is all just a test, all testing, all putting out feelers, seeing what works. I've already got a couple more shows that I'm planning to start next month. And because I'm doing this all by schedule, by like a calendar, there's a very rigid structure to it. It's like it pays off in later terms. Makes me realize why people are into stuff like non-disclosure agreements. Because like if somebody sees your work before it's done, they don't necessarily understand it. People don't see the grand plan that I'm concocting because they just see what's coming out in front of their face in the moment. They see each individual video as it comes out, not as part of a greater whole of this grander experiment, Some people do. Some people watch a podcast and they say, this one did or didn't work for this or that reason. Other people are like, oh, you released one podcast I don't like and now your content's gone downhill, even though all the stuff you were doing before is still being done. Because unlike There Is Too Much Anime, you can't really have too much Digibro, because having too much Digibro doesn't affect me negatively. I'm not a failing industry, I'm as successful as ever, if not more so. And I'm just constantly putting out feelers. What's going to be the next big thing? What's the avenue? What are people going to respond to, People like the old-ass album cast, but it's not growing. It's not a podcast that people are coming to. I don't really know how to promote music content. If you do, promote me in your music content sphere. Please, I need it. Pokemon Journey probably mostly appeals to my fans who are also fans of Pokemon. I can't really see it appealing to people who don't know who me or May are. Nor can I see it appealing to my fans who don't know what Pokemon is, I know there's some people who listen to that podcast even though they haven't seen the movies, just for fun, because I do describe them in pretty intimate detail. But the people who are going to enjoy it the most are the people who are nostalgic for the films. Never a show that's going to blow up big. It's just going to be fun for the people who watch it, But if that podcast didn't exist, there are some people, some patrons, who would be disappointed because they really like it. But nonetheless, there are other people who, if I stopped doing something else and I focused all my energy into the Pokemon thing, they would be disappointed, So, yeah, that's why it's all... the stuff that gets cut, the stuff that I will not continue, is the stuff that no one ever uses the phrase, I patroned you for this, or this is my favorite thing you're doing right now. Those are the things that will probably be cut, unless it's something like Idea that's literally so simple that there's no reason not to do it. It's like literally a spur of the moment, flip on the camera, it takes 3 minutes to record and 3 minutes to edit and 3 minutes to upload. No harm in doing that, because it has no effect on anything. It's just for me and just for fun to share a little idea that I thought was funny with the world. But, if there's a high effort podcast, like, say, which one is the most on the chopping block? I'm not even sure. they're all pretty equally in like a state of some people really like it, some people don't care. 60 Minutes was probably the best example of a podcast that nobody cared about that much. Like, that, we had to finish it. We had to finish the whole season because people had sort of an expectation that we would, but like, not once did I have somebody tell me, oh, this is my favorite podcast you do, or like, this is something to patron for. And that was why I was like, okay, I'm not like rushing in to do another one of these. Eromanga Sensei did have that effect, but that was Eromanga Sensei. It was a special case. Nothing this season is like that. So, you know, I'm hesitant to start up another series of that ilk. And additionally, because of the fractured fan base, there's also a discordance of information between different fans. And this is really my fault, that I talk about different things in so many different places, I can never keep track of where. So, like, there's a lot of information about, like, why certain things are happening on my channels that you will only hear about in Digi Does Life, or the 2 Weeks Review, my patron-exclusive podcasts. Or lots of questions that I answer about my content that you'll only hear those answers if you're in the Discord, which the Digibro Discord is extremely active, by the way. If you're somebody who wants to be in that, like, if you think a community of Digibro patrons sounds like a place you want to be, I'm in it all the time. It's always active. It's basically its own forum. It's pretty fun. I really like being in there. So, you know, there's lots of stuff that gets talked about in there that doesn't really show up on the channels. There's lots of questions I'm answering that if you're in the comments section, you're not getting the answer, because I don't really read the comments anymore, because I can't take it, you know. And the only reason, like, I'm even talking about the Hydea stuff so much is that this discussion also happened in the Discord. Which means that, yes, I've probably insulted some of my patrons. Not that everybody who's criticized it has been equally ignorant about it. It's mostly been commenters who are like, you smoke weed, you're retarded, you know, like, your channel's dumb now because you did a weed. Like, what the fuck are you people talking about? Oh my god. Oh boy. Big weed. Big weed! Alright, that's it for this episode. Here's a scene from Golgo 13, Queen Bee.
No drug! 我が国が真の世界のリーダーたるに必要な条件だ。ノードラッグ。若者の未来を汚染する麻薬は断じて許せない。